Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Hopefully you're still alive in your fantasy football leagues. I'm completely dead in one, but I am setting my lineup just to be nice. Whew, tough year. And in my other league, doing okay. So I'm alive and well. So let's check in with Joe Pisapia. I'm sure he's in several fantasy leagues and going to fight here till the end, do or die. And, certainly that's the scenario, Joe, for a lot of people. And, the big story this week coming out of fantasy, Joe, certainly, we got bye weeks again this week. I understand that, but a lot more injuries than normal this past week. And, certainly some good news coming out of it, but some unfortunate news as well.
Yeah, unfortunate injury news, of course, but also unfortunate circumstances like losing Jamar Chase now this week for a suspension for something horrendously stupid. So when you lose your best player outside of the bye week and not because of an injury, it's pretty frustrating. And I think to the point you made, too, I think this is a good wake-up call for everybody. A lot of league host sites like Sleeper will let you play not only your opponent, but also the median average score every week. And I encourage people to do that next year in their leagues because that rewards everybody who's doing a good job at fantasy. You're going to have a lot of weeks where you have some bad luck. You run up against a team that just kind of goes off. But, when you lose 135 to 122 and you're the third highest point getter of the week, you should be rewarded for that in the long term. So I think that's a shift that's very easy that a lot of people can make in their leagues next year on their league host site. And I appreciate people looking into that because I think it's going to give a better experience to everybody and keep good fantasy managers more engaged all year long.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned I'm looking up my scores. We're talking. I lost by less than a half, or I lost by 0.4 of a point in one of my fantasy leagues. 0.4, but we play with the median score. So I ended up beating the median score. I ended up going 1-1. It wasn't a total loss in that league, good. But I can't find it here. So I picked up my phone. Okay, so here are the bye week teams this week. And look, honestly, this is I know there's 4 teams off, but it's not a horrendous situation because all 4 of the teams with these offenses have not been great. Broncos, Dolphins, Chargers, and Commanders, especially when you look at Washington and Miami, who played this past week. Miami's had like 2-3 good weeks all season. Washington, very few. So the winners from this past week in fantasy includes a member of the Miami Dolphins who's been coming on strong, which is Achane, and should be great down the stretch because this is a guy who's going to play mostly good weather games in South Florida. And I know he's got a game coming up against the Saints too. 120 yards, 5 receptions, 45 yards receiving. Josh Allen had another big 40-point fantasy game. And then the shocker was Jacoby Brissett out of nowhere, setting the all-time completions record, Joe, with 47 and over 452 yards. So I guess, Joe, is it fair to say if the Cardinals are going to go down and go 3-14 this season, may as well go down letting this guy throw 1,000 passes this season? Why not?
Well, what's funny, Craig? I'm old enough to remember when Jacoby Brissett was playing quarterback for the Cleveland Browns a couple years ago. And if you recall, they had a winning record. I want to say they were 5-3 with Brissett before Deshaun Watson came riding back into town and they handed the reins back to him. And everything fell apart. And I think Brissett has proven that if you give him time to throw and you give him a good situation, that he is going to be a productive quarterback, a guy that can help out your offense, right? And I think whether it's for the Cardinals next year or some other team considering the NFL draft class, a quarterback that was supposed to be brilliant looks like it's going to be a bust. I think Jacoby Brissett's going to have a starting job somewhere. I really do. Now, I understand last year in New England it was very bad, but it was a horrible, untenable circumstance with Gerard Mayo, no offensive coordinator. It was a whole just giant disaster there. But you surround him with some good people, the Trey McBrides of the world. You give him some time to throw the football, and Jacoby Brissett can get the job done. So I think he's playing his way into a potential, at least competing for a job next year somewhere else, or maybe even Arizona if they decide to move on from Kyler Murray, which it certainly seems like things are souring there. Travion Henderson could have made this list too, 3 touchdowns. I think that coming out party for him the last 2 weeks has been brilliant. Achane, you mentioned another fantastic game, so they get a little time off here. And credit to the Dolphins. They were kind of a joke in the beginning of the year. Defense has played much better over the last 3-week period. So I want to give a shout out to them because, again, it is possible to turn things around at some point in the season. The Dolphins are showing some fight there after firing the general manager. It's amazing, right? The shockwaves that go through and all of a sudden people are worried about their positions next year and beyond. So good on them. And obviously Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things with a huge victory, a must-have victory too for them against a big opponent in Tampa.
Definitely so for the Bills. Meanwhile, the Week 11 losers, this is pretty easy. Sam Darnold, 4 interceptions on Sunday. My gosh, 279 yards. They could have won this game 4 or 5 different times if they just put the ball down the field. This is the bigger story, which we're going to expand on here. Justin Jefferson, his 5th straight game under 80 yards, and then the Falcons season is now over. Kirk Cousins takes over at quarterback, and Drake London got hurt. He's going to miss this week as well. But let's do this, Joe, because Justin Jefferson is a great topic, not just for this year, but for next year as well. I think you probably would agree with me when I say, at the very worst in terms of talent, this is the 3rd best receiver in the NFL. There's some who think he's number 1. But at the worst, he's probably 2 or 3, but his stats don't even come anywhere near this. And in one of my leagues, I got somebody shopping him. And I'm like, oof, like, I don't know, like for next year, like maybe the temptation is there. But Joe, for this season, I mean, the targets are there. He's not catching the ball. And when he does, there's not much happening. This is like a number 1 overall pick in fantasy a couple of years ago. Is this ever going to change for him? Because I thought he was quarterback proof. I guess that's what they say. It doesn't look like it anymore.
No, it doesn't look like it right now. And I was kind of bullish on buying him this weekend too, because I thought, look, JJ McCarthy's going through growing pains that you would normally have in September, right? But we didn't get JJ McCarthy in September, and the guy didn't play football for a year. And JJ McCarthy hasn't been good. Justin Jefferson, to me, I think is the number 1 wide receiver in terms of skill set, in terms of route running and the complete package. I think Jefferson is the best. But the problem is he's just not on the same page with McCarthy. And right now, that relationship is not good. You see a lot of, strutting around, unhappiness on the sidelines. It's a bad mojo right now, and that's never good. And that's not usually Justin Jefferson's MO, too. He's usually a pretty positive guy. So things are really bad right now for the Vikings, and this is where the coach has to step in. Now, I'll say this. He went from being a buy low in redraft leagues to me to being a buy low in dynasty leagues because he is still Justin Jefferson. He is still all world. He's still spectacular. Now, I don't know if Justin Jefferson wants out of the Minnesota situation or if Minnesota is going to say after this year of letting McCarthy go through these growing pains, maybe he is not the guy. Maybe they do bring in a Jacoby Brissett or they bring in somebody else here to run an offense. And I think that's going to be really interesting next season. But in 2025 redraft leagues where I was hopeful they would get on track, it's really asking a lot, and I think it's just magnified by the time of year because this is our fantasy playoff push, and at the same time, J.J. McCarthy is going through this learning curve, and it's just really bad timing where it just overemphasizes all the bad that's going on with Jefferson. So it's unfortunate right now. Also unfortunate the Drake London news, too, because I don't know about you, Craig. We've talked about these kind of injuries. Pearsall had it. Bowers had it. Really tough situation. 6 weeks later, we see them. Falcons have nothing to play for. Drake London's stock the rest of the year is really in danger too.
Yeah, I would say no chance. I mean, they say it's 1 week. Why? Well, come on. It's going to be longer than that. Okay, so the waiver wire this week has a guy who just came out of nowhere to have one of the best receiving weeks of the season in Michael Wilson because he went along with those receiving yards and receptions for Brissett. But the question is Harrison back this week or next? Wilson is the hottest pickup off the waiver wire, 39% owned right now. The other player at wide receiver, Christian Watson, had 2 touchdowns for the Packers, but I'm guessing, Joe, in every fantasy league, whoever has Josh Jacobs, you never even thought maybe to have Emmanuel Wilson as a handcuff. I'm not saying that he's going to be a 6-week answer, but Joe, Emmanuel Wilson, if he plays for the Packers this week without Jacobs, is going to get 50 yards and a touchdown. I mean, like, that's going to happen. So you have to pick him up if you have Jacobs.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is contextual as you're putting it. So Josh Jacobs managers, if you have him, you got to be extra aggressive on Wilson in case it is longer than a week or 2. If you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you want to have Wilson as insurance policy. So a lot of these guys are insurance. And then with Christian Watson, who's been good the last couple of weeks, Jaden Reed might come back this week too and start working out. So that could get things muddy again in Green Bay. I think Watson's the most appealing to me because he is that big play guy, whereas the other guys, even Gainwell, Sean Tucker, everybody here else who's around is contextual to other guys and injuries ahead of them. So it's a very tricky week. Again, if you have those players, insurance policies are good, but be careful if you don't of overspending.
Joe, we'll see you Sunday on Fantasy Sports Today. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire.
Thanks for having me.